Hello there, lovely people. I don't use voice. Welcome to Virtual Abilities 2023 International Disabilities Rights Affirmation Conference, VAIDRAC. I'm Oriana Hallingwind, and for the savvy ones, you can fetch my legacy name. I'm a chronically depressed transgendered person and under suspicion of having some degree of ASD. I live in France and English is not my native language. I've been in SL for 17 years, intermittently at times, a long-time resident of Cape Able. I love to build things when I have ideas and to explore other sims to be inspired. And now let me introduce you to Emily Wright, a multifaceted talent, rising voice of a generation. As the rabbit in Alice in Wonderland, she will take us on a journey from chaos to calm after receiving multiple traumatic brain injuries. And as always, questions are welcome, but only after the end to leave room for the presentation. That's all, folks.
Hello. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Emily Wright, and I am the creator of It'll Be All Right. I'm so grateful to be invited here. Thank you to Gentle Helen and the rest of the Virtual Ability teams for bringing me here today. Thank you for joining again. This presentation is called Rebalancing the Mind, and I'll be sharing my story, my journey through multiple traumatic brain injuries that led me from a place of chaos to a place of calm. I'll be sharing that journey with you today. First of all, just a little bit about myself. I'm a tri-citizen. I was born in the UK and moved to New Zealand when I was 8 years old, and then moved to Canada when I was 14. So my accent may change a little bit throughout the presentation, but that's totally normal for me. My employment background and experience, I've done a lot of work in childcare and education. So I've done a fair amount of like babysitting and nannying, working in child daycare centers. I also did some extracurricular tutoring and teaching in English, reading, and maths, working with ESL and especially with children with additional learning needs. I also was a ski instructor for a time and then worked my way into the admin side of that. So now I do more supervisor stuff, booking lessons and working with customer feedback, a lot of customer service there. I've done a lot of work in the service industry, a lot of hospitality, retail, and food and beverage, and then worked my way up to management and marketing. So during the pandemic, I was the general manager of a grocery store and cafe that had a online delivery service. And it turned out this was quite crucial for the pandemic, and I was really lucky to be in a position where I was able to help the community a little bit more rather than just being in lockdown. So at our store, we established a community donation pool to get groceries to families in need. And we worked with local charities to raise money to reach out to isolated individuals, particularly elderly. And then because of my position, I was also able to select and support small businesses and startup businesses, many of whom founded their product during the pandemic. So it was really cool to see this other side where people were given all this extra time because of lockdown and they just started exploring hobbies and then turned that into a business. So I feel very blessed that I was able to work with a lot of those people and help them take their hobby into a full-fledged business, which I still see on the shelves, which I still love to see. I have also done a fair amount of work in theater, just for personal passion is something I enjoy, and then a lot of customer service work, including call centers. My primary focus that I'll be talking about today is mental health. I have a rich history of mental health challenges and conquests, as I like to say. I was depressed for a long time. I had depression for at least a decade and was suicidal for many years. My overthinking, especially, was a big contributor because my thoughts ran so fast and full that I felt like I was out of control of my mind. So it's a little bit scary sometimes when you don't trust yourself and trust your mind. I also struggled with very intense emotions that would change drastically and seemingly out of nowhere. But through theater, actually, I learned how to express and understand my emotions. And eventually I did learn that I was sensitive to other people's emotions as well as my own. And I used to get overwhelmed with these like strong conflicting emotions that didn't seem to match what I was going through myself. And then when I learned to make that distinction, that really helped me to balance myself. And I just learned to relinquish ownership of my thoughts and emotions and just kind of observe them from a distance, still appreciate them, but not to get too wrapped up in them. You know, I really just needed to center myself and then bring my own calm into a space rather than being reliant on the space to find the calm. And so my multiple concussions, which I'll be getting into in just a little bit here, I found actually really helped me with this stability. It's not something that I was expected, but just because of the amount of time that I gained, I was able to sort of break down my mind and give myself the time to process how I was feeling and all the things that I hadn't addressed. So I learned to incorporate daily mindfulness and self-care practices, and that's kind of my key focus of every day. It's so essential, and it's so easy for us to get wrapped up in the demands of work and school and just the daily life and bills. So it's important that we give ourselves time each day to look after ourselves. Um, I also found that being sensitive to other people's emotions, when you can understand it and you can use that, it's very useful. It's useful for helping other people, and it's also an asset in business and negotiation and working in customer service, as I've done myself a lot. It's very important to just be aware of how everyone's feeling and then to adjust your behavior to match that. Um, So it's been great in business. At first, it was something that I struggled with, but now I see it as an asset. So I did have multiple traumatic brain injuries in 2017, 2018. And as much as it, kind of sucked at the time, now I see it as something that has really contributed to my positive well-being overall. When I got these concussions, I was told by my doctors, the doctors in the ER, um, to lay down in a dark room with no stimulation until I experienced 24 hours with no symptoms. So the way they explained it was that, lie down, eye blinds on, in the dark, don't do anything, no screens, no music, no books, nothing like that. And then when you experience 24 hours, a full day with no symptoms, then you can get up, move around a little bit, and if you get any symptoms at all, go back to bed and lay down and wait for 24 hours. And then you gradually would build up the movement. So, walking around the house, walking to the end of the street, going to the shop, such a thing. But at any point, if you experienced any symptoms, whether it's a slight headache or dizziness, go back to bed. And so as a result, because the symptoms didn't go away, I ended up spending over an accumulated year with no sensory input. So I basically lay in bed with eye blinds on for an accumulated year. But as studies have shown, and I have learned through my life, that when you are in a state of sensory deprivation, it can make things worse, especially if you have concussions and brain injuries. So I actually found that this experience exacerbated the symptoms, and use it or lose it, right? So I struggled with a lot of things, and at the worst, I could barely open my eyes, and I was just so exhausted all the time. And I had to get help sitting up. I had to get help going to the washroom. I could barely talk. Like, just trying to find words in my mind was a challenge, let alone finding the energy to say it out loud. So it was difficult, like, because I would go back to the doctors and they would say, "Hey, no, you're doing the right thing. Go back to bed, lay down." And I was like, this is clearly not working. Like, I'm getting worse. And they're like, "No, it's fine. This is the right thing to do." And with the concussions and such, like, it hurt. It was painful as well, and just having to live with that. And then also coming from a place of depression and going into this experience basically suicidal, and then now being unable to physically do anything about it, and just lying there. And I really was eventually given a choice, where I either go insane or figure out how my mind works and find my own peace, and I chose that one. So I did find that the immobility initially contributed to an increase in my depression, but I was able to work through it. And then this immobility forced me to heal, basically, because that was the choice I was given. Like, I either do nothing or I consciously do everything. So that was my choice there. So the time gave me a chance to heal. And I took this experience and I took what I learned and I turned it into something called the 4 stages of thought. So the 4 stages of thought is kind of a summary of my understanding of the progression of my mind when I went from a chaotic mind to, well, a calm mind. Obviously still have, those overthinking, and I still have a lot of emotions that I have to manage, but at least now I have the tools to use that, and I have the tools to work with that. And now I choose to share that with other people, and I choose to take my journey and make it into something better, to help myself continually, because we're all on a continual journey of healing, but also helping others to heal, at least beginning with the mind. So the 4 stages of thought it's not a strict step-by-step process. It's a general understanding of the progression of the mind. So the first stage that I'm going to be talking about is distraction. And this is when we keep ourselves and our minds busy to ignore and avoid conflict. So it's really easy to distract ourselves in this world. We live in a exciting technological age, and it's full of content. We can find endless content online, and we can distract ourselves from our minds this way. Even within our minds, we are able to find so many creative things in our imagination to keep us distracted, whether that is fantasy or whether that is a worry that we have, whether it's memories or hopes and fears about the future. These are all there and they're great, but they're distracting from the pain that is often triggering a lot of behaviors that we don't necessarily understand. I do have a YouTube video on all of this that goes into more detail on my channel. It'll be all right. But I'm just going to go through it briefly today. The second stage, when we start to really address that we do have something that needs to be targeted. So if we realize there's a pattern to our behavior that we don't really understand, this is when we move into introspection, where we look inwards and then we commit to self-reflection to understand how we feel and why. So this is just about looking at the patterns in our behavior, what they connect to, and at the same time giving ourselves that time to meditate a little bit and to let our thoughts unravel. Our thoughts tend to take us to their source naturally, and in the first stage, distraction, we kind of divert that route back to the source. And by introspection, we can allow ourselves to feel how we feel and then see where that takes us. Once we have done some self-reflection and we understand a little bit more about why we feel the way we feel and why our mind keeps bringing back these thoughts that maybe we don't want to remember, but if they keep coming back, it's for a reason, And then we move into extrospection. So we look out to see how our behavior is impacting those around us. It's one thing to have, your own traumas and discomforts and fears impacting your behavior, but our behavior does impact everyone else. So it's important that we look and not only self-reflect, but also reflect on our environment and look at how we are impacting those who care about us and the people that we care about. And then what can we do to make things better for everybody? So that brings us to stage 4, resolution, where we have to make a decision about how we want to change and integrate these changes into our daily lives. So this is really key, and it's something that is really about building habits and deciding, okay, so I have got past my distractions and I have done some self-reflection. I've seen how my behavior is impacting those around me. Now, what kind of a person do I want to be? What do I want to stand for? What do I want to choose from my life that defines me? Because so often we define ourselves by our regrets and our fears, but that's up to us, really. We can choose to focus on the negative, or we can choose to focus on the positive, and whichever one that you choose to focus on, that will define your perspective of life. If you're constantly choosing to focus on the negative experiences in your life, then those negative experiences will become the foundation of your future. Just as if you focus on the positive aspects of your past, that will become the framework as you move forward every day. So it is about choice, but it's obviously with you, when you have got depression, it doesn't always feel like a choice. And when you're in that deeper state of depression, it feels like there's this shift in consciousness where you don't really see the world in the same way. And through mind management and the things I'm going to continue to talk about today, it's really about working with your mind to create a system for yourself that cultivates your healing and maximizes your success in the long run. So this was one of the great things that I learned during this experience, but now I'm going to talk a little bit about the recovery process. So after being in this sensory deprived state for so long, integrating into society was a challenge for various reasons. But I eventually managed to speak to my doctor and ask for an alternative for just lying in bed doing nothing. And she gave me the opportunity to join an information session for new concussion patients, which was hosted by the University of British Columbia, and they presented an opportunity to join a research study on new concussion recovery techniques. And this was a really valuable experience for me, and I'm so grateful for the team there for allowing me to join. The study focused primarily on mindfulness and occupational therapy. So basically, time management and meditation techniques and working to balance your mind. I also found a physiotherapist that specialized in concussions, and he was amazing as well. And I got lots of great information from all of these sessions. But unfortunately, that included everything that I had been told when I had got my initial concussions in multiple provinces, in multiple hospitals and medical establishment, multiple doctors, all telling me the same thing, which was to lay in bed and do nothing. I learned that they'd actually known, like from honestly the early half of the 1900s, that this is actually counterproductive, and that if you completely remove sensory input from the brain for that long, it can actually contribute to a deterioration of such. So I was kind of a lot of emotions that came with that, but at the same time, this experience got me where I am today, and it's got me in this position. So that's something I've just kind of had to make peace with. Now, in terms of like daily practices, I meditate every day, a couple times a day. I try to practice mindfulness consistently, or at least I do my best to, and I just try to remember to come back to my breathing. And like I know my mind goes off sometimes, but it's also remembering to come back and try and be present. Time management is a crucial aspect of every day as well, just to make sure I don't get overwhelmed, because I do still struggle with increased sensory input. So it's just really about giving my mind time to process everything that I'm experiencing throughout the day and everything that I'm feeling. I do have a lot of sensitivity to light and sound after being in a sensory deprived state for so long. I was highly sensitive before, and then the concussion experiences just kind of boosted it to the next level. So when I first was able to walk again and was able to walk outside, I would go with my partner and I would hold his arm and he would lead me around, and I'd wear sunglasses or I'd pull like a toque over my eyes, and I usually just would close my eyes because the light was just too bright and too painful, and I wouldn't really be able to see anyway, just because it was like too white, you know. And so he would direct me and he'd lead me around, you know, like take a step here, like we're gonna turn left here, that kind of thing. So that was how I began moving outside. But then really eventually, through all of this process and by incorporating all of these different things each day, I just learned to heal my body by healing my mind first. You know, they say mind over matter, and that's very powerful, and there's some really interesting, inspiring stories out there that I've learned about, and you know, just kind of recognizing that the mind is a lot more powerful than we realize, and I think that there's a lot more to our potential than we know, which is exciting. In terms of the long-term impacts, after being immobile, with my consciousness internalized for so long, and now kind of experience things differently. So as much as I was highly sensitive before, everything is like louder. I get easily overstimulated, so I don't really do the same activities that I used to. Like I don't go to the cinema or concerts, just because it's too loud and too bright. I struggle at bars and nightclubs because of the flashing lights and loud music. So then when there's too much light, my vision goes kind of white, and then I get nauseous, I get dizzy, I get a headache, and then like tinnitus, like that constant ringing, which changes depending on what the environment is and what's going on. So that's the sensitivity of light. And then screens, I do have challenges with screens. After a while of like working in the offices, for example, and looking at screens, it kind of feels like my eyes are burning. But that's just something that I kind of learned to work around. I do like public speaking events like this. Primarily they're virtual, so it's kind of interesting sometimes when I do live panels, when I have a group of people like on a Zoom call kind of set up, because after looking intently at the screen for so long, because you want to stay engaged and show your eyes, the screen kind of goes blotchy, like the colors start pulsating, and I get different blobs of light come out, and everyone's faces kind of disappear, till it's just looking blank, and I get kind of dizzy. It's not too bad right now because like it's a different setup, so this is much easier for me. But it's something that I just kind of learned to deal with through my breathing, especially. Breathing is so important. I'm also most sensitive to electromagnetic fields, which is kind of inconvenient, honestly, because there's a lot of them, and that's just something that I kind of have to cope with. So like I can hear electricity a little bit more keenly. Sometimes I can hear people's phones when they're fully charged and overcharging, and I'll just hear like that high-pitched kind of whistling, bubbling noise, and I'll go around the house like guys, who's this? Like, is this someone's phone? Like, this is fully charged. Can I just unplug it? Like, it's bugging me. And I'm like, okay, kind of weird, but sure. But that's okay. So I struggle with electric cars, for example. They give me headaches. They're just a little bit intense for me. So yes, I'm really looking forward to the progression of e-paper and e-ink technologies, which are kind of inspired by Kindle technology and e-reader technology. They're designed to be easier on the eyes, and you're able to look at it for a longer period of time. So that's something I'm personally very excited about. I also had my memory and cognitive abilities were impacted by this experience. So I had amnesia for a while, but it's better now. I still kind of forget things as we do. Had a harder time remembering things and recalling things. I've learned to get past that, and it's much better now. I had like a brain training app with fun games on it called Elevate, which was pretty cool. And then just incorporating this daily and establishing mindfulness and practices as something that I was able to improve over time. I often wear caps at work to block the direct light from the overhead artificial lights, especially when they're like those really harsh, bright ones, which are at most places. So those are just something that you kind of have to live with. So I have sunglasses and yellow tinted glasses, especially, which I'm actually wearing right now. Those are really great. They've been the best thing for me so far that I've found, because they just take that harshness off of artificial lights, without them being, full sunglasses where you can't quite see so much. So I like those. Plus, they look good. A friend told me that yellow glasses make the world look happier, and I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll stick with those. And yeah, mindfulness and meditation. Meditation is it's not something that you have to do in a particularly strict way. It's something that is unique to all of us. It's really about giving our mind space, and it's about having an activity, whether it's sitting and doing some breathing exercising, whether it's knitting or gardening or whatever it may be, and it's just giving your mind space to process. We process a lot of information every day, whether that is the stuff in our environment, the news, the things going through our mind, our thoughts and our feelings. But there's a lot to process. So I like to explain it as having the goal to establish a clear state. So it's about trying to get a clear slate in your mind. So if you imagine that everything you come across in life is like a strike on a slate, so like a chalkboard. And so everything you feel, everything you think, every person that comes into your life, everything you hear, see, feel, touch, whatever it is, it's like a strike on a slate. And over time that accumulates until the slate is so full, you can't see anything that's on there anymore. It's just a blur. So through mindfulness and meditation, we clear the slate, we wipe it clean. And now the information that gets put on there, we can read, we can identify it, we can understand it, we can process it. But when there's too much on the slate, when our minds are too clouded, too busy, too full, that's when we struggle to process. And that is when we can start expressing our emotions in an unhealthy way through unconscious catharsis, which is when we express our emotions, but we're not in control of that expression. And we might shout, we might cry, we might punch something, we might be mean to someone that we love or just a stranger. And that's unconscious catharsis. We don't really realize that we're doing it, we're just expressing ourselves. But when we use when we use catharsis unconsciously, we don't actually address the root of the problem. We're just expressing how it feels and not actually addressing why we feel that way. So this leads me to something I called mind management. And mind management is something that I learned about through all these experiences. And I realized that, we talk about time management and managing our life to make sure that we can work efficiently, but we don't really talk about mind management and setting up a system in our minds so that we can effectively process our feelings and emotions. So I created this series called Mind Bites on my social media platforms, which are Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Substack. And I've designed it to be as accessible as possible. So all the information is presented in multiple formats. So it's presented as a newsletter, a carousel post, and a real video. And each month I present a different tip or trick or an idea about mind management. So I want to give you an example of the first one I did, Mind Bite number 1, which was count to 10. So with count to 10, this is just basically establishing a brief pause for yourself. It's about just finding a moment when you realize that you've been busy for a long time, like when you have been caught up in your thoughts, when you've been rushing from task to task, you just stop for a moment and count to 10. And something as simple as that can give your mind, which processes a lot faster than we think we do, a moment of pause and a moment to process. So if you're got a lot of tasks for the day, between each task, count to 10. Whether it's aloud or to yourself in your head, that's fine. And then give yourself a break so that you can process the task you've just done and then prepare for the next one. If you've lost something or you've forgotten something, you can't think what it is, just stop and count to 10. I learned this myself because I have had troubles with amnesia, so learning to be patient with myself when I forget things and lose things is really important. So counting to 10 was one of those things, and I tell myself that if it's important, it will come back to you. And even if it comes back to bite you in the ass, it still comes back to you. So that's fine. But yeah, so the Mind Bind series is on my social media platforms. Feel free to follow if you're interested in reading those, or watching those, listening to those, however you want to go. But it really is about exploring thought organization and developing a system in our minds so that we can most efficiently process information and most effectively express how we feel. I've also written a few books throughout my time, and the first one that I wrote is called My Brain Explained, A Modern Conversation of the Mind. And this is about my concussion experiences and what I learned during the concussion experiences. So it goes into a little bit more detail, primarily on consciousness, the development of consciousness, and the evolution, where we're going to go. Very exciting stuff. But yeah, that's the first one. And then the second book I wrote is called The 100 Days of Color, Celebrating Frequentic Beauty. So this one is a little more interesting. It's different. It's based on an experiment that I did with the Spotify program, which is a music streaming platform, to anyone who's not heard of Spotify before. And I did an experiment looking at the relationship between subconscious and algorithmic bias. So as we know, AI and our technology is developing very quickly. It's a very exciting time that we live in, but we know there are certain things that we need to address. There are certain concerns that keep coming up. One of them is algorithmic bias. So with all of these recommendation algorithms, with these AIs and ChatGPT and these exciting new technologies, they are limited by us, by humanity, because we are the ones that create them. And we know we have subconscious biases, and these subconscious biases are being passed on to our technology, which express them as algorithmic bias. But the thing with algorithmic bias and with our technology is they have the potential to reach a much wider audience than we can as an individual human. So our subconscious biases can be plugged into an artificial intelligence, into a program, and then the program will then take that bias and expand it on multiple fold, and it will reach so many more people and negatively impact so many more people than we could as an individual person. And this is one of the key topics of conversation surrounding AI right now, which I think is really important. And I did this experiment with the Spotify program, and as a result, I monitored the recommendations in Spotify as I changed what music I was listening to. Because Spotify has this great recommendation algorithm where it will look at your history, it will look at what you've listened to in the past, and it will give you recommendations. You like this? Maybe you'll like this. So what I did is I changed what I was listening to, specifically who I was listening to, and looked at how the program responded, how the recommendations changed or didn't change as a result. And it's super, super interesting. So that's what the second book is about. But I was basically, as a result of watching how the program changed in response to input over 100 to 200 days, I was able to correctly identify the racial demographic of the programmers. So the people that program Spotify and the curators, the people that give the music as the baseline for recommendations and for playlists, which really shows that there is no online system that is exempt from human bias, because we're the creators. We made all of this. So if we want to address algorithmic bias, we first have to address subconscious bias and do it in tandem, Um, so this book goes more deeply into the psychology of discrimination. The experiment is just kind of the main foundational flow of the book, and then my research took me far deeper than I expected to go. I just was following my curiosity, and it's very interesting. But yeah, so that's my second book. And then something else I want to talk about is lucid dreaming. So I learned to lucid dream during my concussion experiences, and this was one of those those experiences that kind of change your understanding of reality a little bit. Um, I write every day, so every day I write my dreams down, and I will be publishing as a series of volumes. And it primarily discusses what I call lucid physics. So it goes into the composition of the dreamscape, how it is built by the subconscious mind, and how it relates to our waking conscious experience. And so looking at those interactions, but then also talking about how we manipulate the dreamscape, and my understanding of how to change things and do whatever you want to do. And I understand it as this vibrational matrix, but it's all explored through stories, because these are true stories of my dreams and my lucid experiences in those dreams, but they're not a part of this reality. They're just when I'm asleep. um, but it's fun, because like I write a lot of nonfiction, so this has been a great experience for me, because it's still technically nonfiction, but it is stories, so I get to do some more creative writing, which I enjoy. Yeah, the last thing that I'm gonna just touch on before we move to questions is running. So I I began this story with my concussions, where I was not able to stand up. I wasn't able to really speak. And as someone that used to be very into fitness, and I used to run every morning before school, I wasn't able to do that. And when I was able to stand up and walk around, it was like every step sent a shockwave of pain up through my body. And even just that motion was so overstimulating and exhausting, and just like couldn't focus on anything, because you're so overwhelmed with a step. And now I have a running coach, and I began with him at the beginning of the summer, and now the furthest I've run, it was 14 kilometers in September. And this was a big feat for me. Like, that I didn't know that I could do that. I never expected to get back to this. So I just wanted to put this in there just for myself, as like this is a personal achievement for me. We're moving into winter now, so haven't really been doing so much running lately. I did the 14K and then pulled my hip flexor, and now I'm like, okay, I'll just chill and do some physio now. So that's fine. But yeah, I just wanted to put that for myself, because I remember not being able to do that at all. um, and yeah, I think that's that. So thank you so much for listening. This has just been a brief of my story, the things that I've learned on this journey, and then what I'm trying to do now to pass this information on. Thank you so much for being here and for listening or reading these captions. Thank you for supporting this. Thank you for inviting me. Feel free to reach out to me at It'll Be Alright, which is spelled with a W, like my last name. Does anybody have any questions?
We have a number of comments. One from Shiloh. I applaud you for your work focusing on concussion and head injury. And there is a question that follows that. Have you worked with tonal meditation and or color meditation? And how much of your creativity has returned, as well as rational deductive reasoning? As a survivor of traumatic head injuries, I understand the sensitivity you experience and the changes in hearing, light, et cetera, et cetera. I can assure you that things do improve and creativity can return and memory can return, and you can actually rewire your brain through meditation. Shiloh had to go through speech therapy and her coordination was skewed, but as a young adult, it was rectified through dance. Via visual meditation, used that too often as a child, not calling it mindful meditation, and repaired herself. And have delved into tonal meditation, working with sound, and I also practice mindful meditation today. So the question is about the tonal meditation and color meditation.
Yeah, hey, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that, Shiloh. And yeah, like I absolutely agree with you on rewiring, and that was something I actually had written in my notes but didn't say. I personally kind of feel that with the state of my mind before this experience, um, I was so wound up and my thoughts were so tangled and my feelings so congested, and that I feel that the blows to the head shook apart those connections. And I I remember a time when I was just like laying on a bed babbling numbers and random words and just trying to make connections again and just trying to hold on to myself. And it feels like you're falling down this long dark tunnel and you're just trying to claw your way back up. And I feel like the blows to the head shook apart the connections, and then through mindfulness, through these experiences, through the 4 stages of thought, I was able to rewire it and I was able to build it back up. And I'm a different person now than I was before. Like in so many ways. Like I look the same, I don't think the same, I don't feel the same. And I do believe that I've rewired my brain um, because of these experiences. In terms of your question about tonal medication and meditation and color meditation, I do know these have been very successful. I'm glad that you've had an experience, successful experiences with this. It's really interesting when you start to look at some of the work with virtual reality and headsets, and there are more people creating programs and such for that use tonal and color meditation, which is super interesting. I'm very interested in colors. Like you'll notice that my slides are that kind of peachy pink with the black on top. It's actually technically not black; it's more of a deep blue. But I'm very aware of the colors that I use just generally, like with the work that I do, because it does make an impact. Yeah, that answers your question.
We have a question from Buffy, and Buffy asks, let me just scroll back, has being in Second Life been helpful or inspiring for you?
Yes, it honestly has been so inspiring just coming into this space. Like I'm so grateful for Gentle Heron and the Virtual Ability team for inviting me here. I didn't know this existed until I got that message. And it's been really amazing to see how many people experience Second Life as a sense of liberation, you know, and that it provides so many opportunities to live in this way and to explore in this way and meet people. and I saw a comment as well about the Second Life thing, about how I said that this is easier for me than doing like a virtual live panel where I have to be looking at the camera and I have to be alert, and it's really because people can see my face. Like when I'm doing the live panels and I'm actually on camera, I have to be present and aware and attentive on the screen, and that's when my vision starts going all funky. So with Second Life, because you can't see my face, I can look down at my notes, I can look out the window at the trees. I have my yellow sunglasses on as well, which helps. So when I'm doing the virtual presentations, when I'm doing the panels, it's important that people see my eyes. So I wear different glasses. They're blue light filter lenses, but they're clear, so it doesn't filter the colors as much. So yeah, I have really enjoyed my experience with Second Life here. This has been awesome. Thank you.
We have a question from Itako. Do you have a safe space where you can go, mental or physical, that you retreat to when things get too much? Certainly not the total blackout space like was recommended, but something else.
Yeah, it's like when you meditate, there are different scales to it, you know, like we all start somewhere. And it's really, you know, there's something that we're journeying towards and something that we're working towards, trying to discover in ourselves, trying to find. So for me, I tap into like my third eye and crown area. So between the top of my, so in between my eyebrows and then up to the crown of my head, as that bit on my forehead. And I just kind of tap into there, and it's like just this great big pulsating orb of light that is all rainbow and gray at the same time, and it's just like beautiful, and it's just that peace, you know. And I'll just tap into that, and it just kind of floods my mind and floods my body, and you just like you're one and you're nowhere and you're everywhere, and it's amazing. And I actually had this funny thought yesterday, and I did some math and I looked it up, and you know, they say it takes 10,000 hours to be a master at something. And through my concussion experiences, I spent 10,000 hours, more than 10,000 hours in this sensory deprived state. So that's more than 10,000 hours of meditation. And now I'm able to just tap into that at any point, like in the middle of a conversation when someone is maybe being a little frustrating. I can just tap into that, and it's just like this flood of peace, and it's just so nice. But in terms of your external environment, it is important to establish a safe space for yourself. So I'm in my room right now, and I have my little office space with all my trinkets and my quotes on the wall for myself. And I have nice lighting in here with a salt lamp, and it's just like making sure that when you have your physical space, to make sure it reflects your purpose. You know, like let it be a reflection of you, and not just who you are now, but who you want to be. You know, like they say, like your external environment is a reflection of your internal mind. So if there's clutter everywhere and your apartment is in a mess, that's an expression of your mind made physical. So one of the, you know, mindfulness meditation practices that is really great is just cleaning up, because by cleaning up the space around you, you make space for your mind. That makes sense.
A great comment from Ava. Your eloquence is absolutely inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I consider myself a slow processor and recognize my need for processing the information and experiences of each day, and felt that the world does not always encourage that. I look forward to reading more on your links and sharing the video.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, like in terms of like what you said about slow processing, you know, like slow and fast is all relative, really. We all process and think in our own way. The problem is that we live in a society that was not built by or for us, and that impacts so many people in so many different ways, you know, and like there's a certain expectation in education and business for speed, because we're all about, you know, productivity and you know, hitting targets and stuff like that, and everything's very rushed. So having the confidence in yourself to stop and to slow down and give yourself what you need is super important, and that's one of the strongest things you can do. You know, I said to a friend the other day that was, what did I say? Being yourself is the strongest and most sustainable form of rebellion. And I love that. And it just kind of came to me as I said it. And I was like, I'm going to remember that. I'm going to say that at a speech or something. So there you go. But yeah, be yourself and allow yourself to be yourself. Don't limit yourself to fit someone else's expectations, because in the end, you're the one that's going to suffer the most because of it.
I think we've come to the end. So thank you very much,
Okay.
Emily. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time here. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or you have stories you'd like to share. Thank you very much.